So the meeting begins. John, would you like to give a brief summary of the harbor master, from the harbor master?
Sure. So I'm just going to give...
wait, sorry, I got to get flip on.
Okay.
My mistake.
No worries.
Okay, I'm going to put you on, okay? And hopefully this will work. Okay, Flip is on. He's on speaker. You'll be able to hear him.
Hopefully you can hear me.
This is as loud as it gets, so.
All right.
Okay, John, we're just starting right now, Flip, and John is going to give the harbor master's report.
Sure. Just a quick update. You know, this is the busy time of year where everybody's renewing their permits. Wait list is being gone through. So far, we have a total of, right now, 232 permits. 132 of them have been approved so far. 100 are still, I'm still waiting for Connecticut registrations. The process was delayed this year. The state of Connecticut, for some reason or another, did not get their stickers on time. So many people experienced getting their paperwork in February, sending in their money, even renewing electronically, and some of them are just getting their stickers now. So this has greatly reduced my numbers are usually better than this, but it's about 57% approved. Usually it's better than that because we've only got about a week to go, so I'll have to extend it. Wait list stands at 172 right now, which is greatly reduced from 2-3 years ago. When I came on board, we were somewhere in the 230 to 240 range. We have a number, so far I've had a total of 15 assigned moorings. The mooring field north of the Darien Boat Club is being revitalized. All of the old tackle is being pulled out. It's all being replaced with new tackle, completely new. There are 10 spots up there. I've assigned 9. So there's still 1 spot that's open, and that area is going to be for vessels 18 feet and under. For the most part, it will be people who have the ability to either use the boat club launch or use a kayak to get up there. Norotan Yacht Club, although I opened it to the Norotan Yacht Club, the problem is the launch there is an inboard, and it wouldn't be the best place for that vessel to go. So right now it's just Darien Boat Club and people who can kayak out. I've got a number of issues that I'm working through. Each year I have a group of people who relinquish their moorings, and then becomes the task of trying to find somebody to take it, and then the whole bargaining process of selling and procuring used tackle. It takes a little while, but it's progressing. We have a number in the works right now. And I will continue to work down the wait list even as the season has begun, going out seeing who is available to take a mooring, even in the spring. That's about it.
Hey, John.
Yep.
Quick question for you. Now that we have largely pushed the draft harbor ordinance onto other people's tables, do you want to maybe sometime midsummer or later summer begin the process of reviewing the mooring tackle specifications? I think those will be much easier to do than the harbor ordinances.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I was thinking we could either start before the ordinances were, depending on how the ordinances land, hopefully if they land the way that we have it, there could be ordinance updates for the berthing harbors, and then we would have to work on the specifications for the day harbors.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely something we can start on sooner than later, but we really won't be able to do much about it as far as the day harbors until after the ordinances are passed.
Right. All right, well, I believe I have a Word version of that document, so I can
Okay.
circulate that, and we can all start to look at that.
That'd be great.
Questions for John? All right, then we're going to move into the revised ordinances, and this is, I'm going to give a quick summary of where I see us being. Frank had called me earlier and said he'd like an opportunity to say something as well, and he'll go next, and then whoever would like to follow on. Our counsel is here in the room, so if there's questions that you feel should go to Patty, then please do that. So, the revised ordinances have been approved by the BOS. From the BOS, it goes to various committees of the RTM. There's a primary committee and 2 subsidiary committees that have a hand in it. Frank is much more familiar with the flow of these committee meetings and the necessary public notices that are required, and he will speak to that. I am also, separately from that, trying to arrange briefing sessions for the flag at Norotan, for the flag at the boat club, and for the police department, just to share with them, who might not be at the various RTM meetings, what's going on. Our most likely case, as I understand things, is that there will be RTM specific meetings, and those RTM committees are represented here in this room, followed by public comment periods, followed by reverting to the full RTM for voting. There is a possibility that coming out of the committees, there will be commentary that needs to be considered. And we'll work with council on those comments. And I guess it is possible that it would have to be back before the BOS again. I don't know. We'll see step by step by step. Now, that's broadly speaking my understanding of what's going to be going forward. And so adoption isn't until the fall, it's after the voting season. And everyone, we're going to try to make sure that everybody has plenty of opportunity in the proper forums to make comment. I'd like to invite Frank to weigh in right now, because he's been thinking a lot about this through his role in the RTM. And Frank, if you can share what you were thinking about with all of us, we appreciate
Up
it.
here at the table?
Yep, and I'm turning this microphone here so Flip can hear you.
Why don't you join me as well?
Sam, could you mentioned there's different committees, I think it would be helpful for anybody who's watching to name which primary committee the RTMs is assigned to and the secondary. Does somebody cover that?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
In a way, it's good to be back. I was on this committee from around 2001 until pre-COVID, 2019, when I cut down my responsibilities for this as my responsibilities over the RTM went up. But my congratulations to you all on getting a good draft together. Needed. it took a lot of work, and I'm sure that it will go through on a
Eventually.
timely basis. I'd like to introduce Adele Connor, who is the chairman of the RTM's Park and Rec Committee. And the missing chair over here is Mac Patrick, who couldn't make it this evening. He's on his way back from a family wedding. And Mac is the chair of the Public Health and Safety Committee of the RTM. I don't blame anyone for getting scrambled in the different committees. As I know that some of us are on the RTM and have done a lot of good public service in the various committees that show up. Briefly, civics lesson. When we go to vote every year, we elect members to the RTM. There are 100 members on the RTM. Within the 6 districts and voting districts in town. Each district nominates 2 people to serve on the rules committee. The rules committee then assigns the 100 people out to one of 7 different committees. We have 3 committees here. The other committees are finance, public works, education. TGS&A, which is, we always say TGS&A is one syllable, it's town, government, structure, and administration. It's also like none of the above. If an issue comes into the RTM that's not education or finance or one of the other prime committees, it winds up down to TGS&A. We've handled burning issues like the dog leash law and blight and the paper bag ordinance and things that sort of utilitarian, plus changes to the town charter and town code. And so that's why I'm chair of that committee, and that's why my committee is involved in this. But Adele's committee, which is Park and Rec, is most closely involved in the structure and content of the legislation. And Mac Patrick, public health and safety, he got now reluctant, but he got assigned as a secondary committee because their responsibilities are looking after emergency services, police, fire, post 53 and such. And so as a courtesy, they included the rules committee, assigned 2 secondary committees, and good old TGS&A is the primary committee. Normally when a resolution, a couple of different ways that resolutions go to the RTM. Sometimes we receive a pre-baked, pre-formatted piece of legislation, and what we're doing is reviewing its, and I'm not saying its worthiness, its merit, to promote it back to the RTM for a vote. Other times we're asked to develop on our own a resolution such as the paper bag ordinance or the blight ordinance, where there was nothing to go on. We had to create an ordinance and then get it back up to the RTM. And that process resembles what you all had to go through in the last year or so. In this case, your resolution was approved by Board of Selectmen on the 7th, and the Board of Selectmen recommended that the RTM take it up, and they did that by sending it to the Rules Committee. Rules Committee pulled the trend, looked at it, and said, all right, we'll assign it to TGS&A as the primary committee, and then Park and Rec and Public Health and Safety as secondary committee. But our responsibilities now are to, because the changes are complex, they're changing the charter, and no matter when you have a charter change, you've got to have a public hearing, and after the public hearing, you've got to wait 60 days before RTM can take it up. Also, it makes this one is especially complex because it involves harbor management, which has been authorized, the town has been authorized to do certain harbor management and put the entries in the town code. When we have the charter up here, then we have the code. The code is 95% of what we're considering here. And normally, town code just needs to be voted on, change amendments to the town code. It goes right into the RTM and passes by majority. In this case, in that it has to do with harbor management, the state statute comes into play, which says you also have a public hearing on that. So working with town council, and we're trying to work out right now the two requirements for the charter and then for the code. They're slightly different, and the number of days you've got to wait between the time you publish it in the newspaper and how many times you have to publish it in the newspaper.
And how many newspapers you have to publish?
Oh, it's a mess. Patty and Wayne have to figure this out as to whether the charter gets published and then the code, whether the two different boxes in the newspaper, whether they can be combined or not, and how many times they have to be run. After you run the one for the town code, you have to wait 15 days before you can have a public hearing. So that, when we look at the calendar of how all this goes, it is not a pretty sight because it looks as if the hearing would be in the week of June 19th.
June or May?
Yeah, I looked at this. Ninth. Counting out the days. I say the week of the 9th because once we figure out when the hearing can be, we want to consult the committees and other interested parties so that we schedule it on a night that is reasonable and not high school graduation or something stupid. So we'll, once we know the parameters of when the hearing can be based on the timing, then we'll bubble that around. And when we pick the date, that date then goes into the newspapers for the public notice and on the website. So it's not an apology. I felt bad about it. I thought that we would be able to move along more quickly. But when you get snarled up in this, it's not a pretty picture.
Just a question, when you're talking about this hearing that might take place in June,
Yeah.
what actually transpires at this hearing and what is the format?
Well, I've done a couple of them. And we had the bag ordinance, about 45 people showed up.
Mm-hmm.
When we changed the little piece of the charter that had to do with relationship with town council, 3 people showed up.
Mm-hmm.
So we would probably rent town hall just to have a little formality. I believe we could very well have it in this room. The members of our 3 committees are invited to listen, but there only has to be the 2 people there, a moderator and a clerk. Now, we don't need the clerk so much because we have Channel 79 to record it and the details. And what the clerk will do is for each speaker, and we'll pick either a 2-minute limit or a 3-minute limit. For each speaker, make a sentence or 2 of what the point of their comments were. They may be in favor of the whole ordinance, that's a nice one to write down. If they have specific comments on it, then that's noted as well. That becomes like the minutes of the meeting. And the 3 committees then get a copy of the minutes for their reference. After the hearing, once we know when the hearing will be, the three committees are going to probably pick the date for their meeting. Each committee has a regular meeting, it's just set up in a year in advance. It might fall, or if the timing is, say, not have a regular meeting that month, but have a special meeting, call a special meeting. We haven't really worked out how those post-public hearing meetings will be. We could have all three committees meeting as a joint committee, or we could actually meet individually and get our initial impressions and notes together, and then come together to compare notes and hammer together the recommended version. I would say that all of our meetings are public, recorded. And so that if anyone else wants to come to those meetings to put in their comments, if you will. In that, I think on my committee of 11 people, I think there's one voter. And I haven't polled your group, but you know we have two strong voters, at least one of them's here.
Right, we
I
have
think we have
voters.
four.
How many?
I think we have 4
Oh.
or 5.
4 or 5.
Good.
Susan says yes.
All right. And that'll be very helpful. To the topic of whether you are a boat owner or not, we've all been to hearings, when you walk in, you put your name on the list, and then someone says, okay, we're going to call people in the order that they signed up. I thought it would be useful when we put down a person's name and their address, which you need to do because that means you're a resident of the town, and the residents of the town can speak. Then another column on there is, are you a voter? What do you own a vote? And I didn't know whether that was legal or not, and I checked the town council yesterday, and he said, yeah, sure, why not?
Why is that
That's not-
relevant?
Pardon me?
Why is that relevant?
I think it's relevant in the person's comments about some of the details of the legislation would be relevant. And they were based on some knowledge, and so we would be able to weight their comments appropriately.
Frank, can I ask a question with Patty that has to do with this? So like at the Board of Education, when they have a public hearing, residents can speak, and anyone that's employed by the Darien Public School System can speak. So in this case, we know that there are non-residents that have moorings. So Patty, can a non-resident that has a mooring or is on the waiting list speak? That's a key part,
Sure.
I think.
I think have public comment. Anybody can
Okay,
speak.
well, Frank, you said you had to be a resident. I just want to make sure that we get it out. It doesn't need to be a resident. You just need to be
Good
a
point.
concerned voter.
Because
or-
there's no requirement that you be a Darien resident to have a
No.
mooring.
Okay, that's what I want to make sure that I understood that.
So in the process there, we have a hearing, we have the committees take advice of the hearing, plus their own observations. And what do they say about legislation in Congress? It's like preparing sausage. Well, the crank on the sausage machine will go around, and we will prepare a consolidated, recommended, blended piece of legislation that will go not for approval by rules, but it will pass through rules to the floor of the RTM. Rules serves a very useful function of gatekeeping items that are put on the agenda for the RTM. So if something's not cooked yet, they'll say, well, why don't you hold this until some changes are made, and others will pass right through. Our full expectation is that this will be cooked and ready to be presented to rules on September.
This, whatever it is.
Rules is meeting on the 8th, right, no, week after Labor Day. And so it'll be presented to rules and then put on the agenda for the September 29th meeting. Beginning of fall, season's over, but the expectation would be that the legislation would be in place to be put into effect in 26.
Frank and I had talked about that at the public hearing, it would be a good, would be an opportunity, perhaps that you would, an informational session before the public hearing starts, if you'd be interested in that. It'd be a good, you know, obviously anybody can come, so.
I flew.
If it's convenient, if the timing works, you know, that's why he was talking about shooting around the dates to see if that's the case.
I floated the topic to town, to Wayne, and that'd be a pretty good idea. So, pretty good idea, might play out like this, the public hearing is called 7:30 over in the auditorium. And that some representatives of Harbor Master and Commission do a dog and pony show for about 20 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, to set the stage. And then Adele with a gavel. I'll get you a gavel. Bang, here we public hearing, all the comments are welcome. It's your guess as far as mine. I watched them, I'll put out there 20 people. I don't know, I really don't know how many people will be interested. It'll be the boaters in town.
We'd
So
like
that
to
will
just do the
come.
best thing that we can to make people aware, be able to ask questions, put our presentation out there, and help each group get kind of through their own meeting routine to the extent we're an information source. We know we're not voting, we're not members of the committee, but
I think
we're trying to be helpful.
the presentation that you make at Darien Boat Club with the yacht club, that probably is very good idea to just
John
quickly come to that.
John gave a very good 8 to 10 minute presentation for the BOS. And that's,
Pull that out of the file, buff it up a
I
little
think
bit.
you dust it off and use it, because I'm kind of in favor of keeping this, the main talking points the same throughout the process.
Yeah. All right,
Until folks, I mean, we gotta be honest, until folks start pulling at it. and
Veering
people-
off into the
People
woods.
will pull at it, and you know, you were at our meeting, you know they will pull at it. They were just saving their questions for you, so you know it's coming back. Correct, he was very nice, he came to our Park and Rec, well, a virtual meeting.
I just don't see this as controversial as the blight ordinance or the paper bag ordinance, which we had, you know, because anyway, we'll see. What did I say, 20, 25, 20 people?
Whatever.
If it's south of 20, I win.
Yeah, no,
North
you
of
guys can
20.
bet between you, but we'll just be
Are there
interested.
any questions? I have one more comment before we, one more comment.
No, except I'd love, maybe it's automatic, but I'd love to actually know when it has been decided what the sequence of meetings is.
Absolutely.
I'd like to know what that is to share with the group.
It's like everything's sort of like, you know, we're waiting for a crisp definition of what we have to do in the newspaper. And,
Understood.
And when we get that definition of what our obligations are, then we can set the date on the hearing.
And that's bubbling up through Patty and Wayne, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough.
All right, one other comment, and also say something else. When your 5-page, when rules gave us the 5 or 6 page document, the red line document, that came through the Board of Selectmen, it came to RTM, and then was assigned out to the committees. I mentioned earlier that practically every piece of legislation we work on has a different source point. Sometimes it comes pretty close. You know, in this case, I looked at the 6-page document and started to pick up some anomalies, either in punctuation or capitalization, or the very first 2 sentences we have a boat and then we have a vessel. Okay, let's decide, is it going to be a boat or vessel? And just slam them down through, do a, word replace. But right off in the first 2 things, and that caught my attention. And then I saw some things that were in that draft that were probably picked up from someone's earnest memo where it says, please note that such and such. And yeah, that's going to be edited out. You're not going to have a law that says, please note that. It's just not, it's too informal. And there's I think a couple of examples like that. Another example is, and you all can look at it to really figure out if I am looking at this right, when you define the harbors, usually it's a line from here to there, and there are kind of the two instances where it says from, and there's no to. Or at least a person reading it, you probably all know what you meant on that, but then reading it, a impartial observer will say, that doesn't quite read right. I think there's two of them in the conversation.
So Frank has got a whole list for you, for us, that the first edits ready.
About 25 items.
So that.
And so I've talked to, I have said the two ways to go. One is address these glitches and come up with version 2 of the 5 pages, and probably has to be run through the selectmen and town council's approval of it, and therefore when our committees are working on this thing, we're working up with a cleaned up version, so that when someone comes to the public hearing, they're not pointing out a glitch. Well, let the good times roll. If somebody's that interested and comes to the public hearing and it points out an anomaly, then fine, it will be duly noted. But if by making a version 2, you come up with a clean version. And it was thought out, and when I talked to town council yesterday, I explained the situation, and he said, Frank, are these substantive changes, or are they cosmetic? Now, substantive change might have been 3 versus 4 boats on a mooring, or what the date is of a cutoff point of get your reservation, get your boat on the mooring, a substantive thing. The 25 things that I commented on are cosmetic, and absolutely did not get into the substance of anything. So I think Wayne and I talked about that, and Wayne said, let it go. So during the period of time where I was presenting the choice of clean up or let it go, we had questions of what are we going to do? And I'm happy that we got guidance, and I'm just perfectly content now to let the thing go as it is. It just makes the work that we all have to do after the public hearing is to do those cleanup things. So there we are.
Well, you all have
if
more experience in town committees and RTM approvals than I do. It would be
I wish I was
hard
back
to have
on the
less. So here's the question. Frank has laid out 2 paths. And Wayne has said, let it stay. But Frank is undoubtedly right about at least some of the comments that there's vessels and boats and things like this. Would you guys tell me, in going through the various committees that it is going to go through, are we highly likely to have an accumulation of other comments?
Highly likely.
And is it highly likely that we're going to have to create a version 2 at some point, so that we could bankroll Frank's comments, wait for additional comments, wait for whomever does it, and then say, okay, for the RTM, the various committees have made their comments, council has incorporated them into a new document, voila. Is that the best way to go?
Well, that's the way we're going. I mean, we will,
Okay,
I think the decision's made, essentially. I mean, we'll bankroll your edits. That'll be first in the process of
Yeah.
of the edits, but, and then the RTM will work on it, and I'm sure we'll be asking you questions from, time to time along the way.
Okay.
But then the changes will, we'll fight about it, and, or not. And then, and a final product will come, I think, via the Patty.
It's interesting that the document that came through from the Board of Selectmen through rules to our committees was a red line document.
Red line versus what's on the books today.
Yeah, this is what it is, because what Wayne is gonna do, what Patty and Wayne are gonna do, is when we get down the road, we're gonna come up with a resolution that says section so-and is deleted and replaced with this. So in other words, you're gonna clean off that section 61 and present a new, I have a number right, but a new number 61.
So
So what I would love to do when we start reviewing it is to have that clean version and have our teams working with and just say a red line is red line, it shows new and old. But just go ahead and have a nice clean document that we can work with. And if some of the suggestions have merit, go ahead and put that, let them go in there as red line. But it'll work out.
So accept all the red line, make it a black line, and use that as your comment?
Yeah.
I don't know exactly the process, what it's gonna be right now,
Well, we received it as a PDF. And if we,
If I could just clarify, I'm sorry, we gave it to the Board of Selectmen
Both
as a
ways.
clean,
both ways.
both ways, yes,
Yeah.
so, it could be provided to each of the committees that way.
That's the
That's
same
what we
way.
did.
Exactly, I think we did, yes.
I think you have to show the people the changes. If
The
you
public
just show
needs
them
to
a
see what the
clean,
changes are.
yeah, if you show them a clean document, they have no idea.
well, we can,
What it was.
the current, okay, and the current red line does that. And so we could, when we're putting stuff up on the webpage, why don't we do that?
I think a
But
clean
then
and a
for
red
the
line
actual
make the most
committee
sense.
work, and work with a clean document is the emphasis.
I think all Frank is referring to so that we can see the new edits and not your edit, somehow to differentiate it.
Yeah.
We will
Well, you
figure
two
that
can
out.
work that out.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Okay.
Or Patty will.
the emphasis is that every,
Every
Colors, please.
every significant piece,
So I have a comment and then I have a question for Patty. I guess I didn't ask the question for Patty. So once the RTM committees vote, does it go back to the Board of Selectmen or does it go to the full RTM? That's my first question.
Well, there's no requirement that it go back to the Board of Selectmen because they've already made their recommendation and now it's the RTM's turn to make their recommendations. I would say though, as a point of accommodation, we probably do want to just get their feedback as to what the final version's going to be.
So I guess if they give feedback and they don't agree with some of if there are any changes, then we go around in circles. I guess, where's the starting and stopping point? Just so we're all clear on the process.
Well, the RTM gets the final decision, so that is the way the statute is set up. The special act requires that the RTM vote on it, that the Board of Selectmen make recommendations. Okay, so there's a difference of authority there. So that first process has taken place. The Board of Selectmen have made their recommendations, and now the RTM gets to hear the public comments, make the changes, and vote on the final version. But again, I think if
We'll all
Wayne-
be talking to each other.
Right, if Wayne were here, I think he would say to everybody,
Yeah, yeah.
you might as well do it because you want everybody on board as to what the final version is going to be like, right?
and not to draw this process out over the summer, but it'd seem reasonable that when we have a reasonably finished document, all of our meetings are public, and so any member of the public may come and comment, and you know what, those comments might be good. So we might actually take the suggestion and incorporate it in the final draft. That's what the meetings are for, and that's why everything we do is on 79, so if somebody's watching that wants to weigh in on it, they'll know what that schedule is, and they can do it. And this person is still not content after all that. When there's a meeting of the RTM with all 100 people, they can say, I'd like to amend, paragraph 4, they take this,
Okay, that's
and then
good.
the RTM will vote on it, and that's what the whole thing is about, is to get approval by the RTM of the document that we submit, or the document that we submit as amended.
So that was my question. Now I just have a comment, and obviously I respect Frank and Adele very much. I think what might be a better way to alert the public is to have a public meeting at least a couple of days before the public hearing. Because at the public meeting, instead of going into all these individual groups, you could have a public meeting in town hall and invite anyone that has a mooring or that's on the wait list. It can be published, any boat club member, any yacht club member, they can take a look at it. They can ask questions, it can be a back and forth. And then they can digest it all. And then at the public hearing, they've had a chance to see what's going on. Because we haven't had ordinance changes in many years. So we have probably almost a lot of new boaters that don't even, I guarantee you most of them don't even know what they are. So they're used to doing things a certain way. So the more education we can do to the public, I think would be beneficial. And then at the public hearing, we're just listening to the public and their comments. It's not a back and forth.
Well, it's not, definitely not a back and forth, that's
No.
for sure.
So
Something to think
that's
about.
just I had put that in an email to both Adele and I think she let Frank know. So I'm just saying it's another way to
An
do it.
observation, the RTM's primary and secondary committees are going to do their work and accept public input and observations. First at the public hearing and at the meetings where they work things out. The program that Sam outlined of making presentation to boat club and yacht club, who else is there? You know, maybe some invite the public to either one of those, whatever. But the RTM is obliged to do the public hearing and really nothing else. I mean, that's what we're supposed to do, and we'll do it. Anything additional, let the good times roll. Go ahead and do what you want to do. Fair enough?
I disagree, but that's okay.
What is your suggestion?
I think that we should have a public meeting. Anyway, we don't need to.
Yeah, and who would be the convener of it,
The convener could be the 3 committee chairs.
if we chose to?
Correct, so that
I
way.
have a feeling we will choose not to.
And also, well, the committees would vote on it, and also
Okay, this is
Sam,
Carol,
John.
laundry guys, so
Go ahead,
we'll
okay.
worry about
But
this later.
Sam and John could then be this, they would be up front asking, and Flip answering, or your whole committee.
I
answering
think the program that
questions.
Sam has outlined, and sounds very reasonable, is to have those, exactly what you want done, but it's convened by the commission or the harbor master.
But I guess then, I'm understanding what Susan's saying. Sam, you said you're gonna meet with the flags, but how do we know the flags are then gonna communicate whatever to the whole Norotan Yacht Club membership?
Well,
for
yeah,
instance?
and Sam and John could convene the meeting, not the RTM. Maybe it could be a public meeting for you guys. And I mean, it's you guys are the ones that can explain it the best.
This hasn't been occurring in secret, though. This has been going on for some time, all broadcast on Channel 79. And in every meeting, there are representatives of the Norotan Yacht Club, of the Darien Boat Club. Every single person here is a voter, to my knowledge. And it's the RTM's job to represent all of the people in their districts, whether they're voters or not.
But it
right?
doesn't happen. It just doesn't. I remember in Norotan Yacht Club, there's been no communication in the membership.
Right.
Zero.
Well, that's right, but
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that there will be none between now and September. It only means we haven't figured out the best way to do it.
No, I mean to David's point, saying, well, people are a member of the club, they've heard about this. I'm just saying, we haven't.
But not everything that is voted on in the RTM is discussed in public forum.
That's
Absolutely, it is
incorrect.
public.
Well, I mean, in a special meeting, I mean, it's incumbent upon the people, if they have a particular interest in something, whether it's paper bags, or moorings, to be aware of that and be involved. These meetings are open. They've been open for as long as people can come if they want and be involved in comment.
And Lori, it's April,
I understand, but it's not gonna hit for this voting season anyway.
correct.
Susan, what you're
Correct.
saying is
So-
it's good practice, right? It would be good practice.
If, you know,
That's,
I
I
just
think
think
that's
if
what
you're
you're trying to
if you're
say,
trying
right?
to
Doesn't
educate
matter where it
voters.
happens, it
Right.
would be good practice.
right, the more people that
We should
can,
take that into
the
consideration.
more people that can see the ordinances, the better it will, better process it will be. They're not trying to, you know, yes, David, you're right, it has been discussed, but the documents just became public a very short time ago. So, you know, when you have your meetings, you didn't post the documents so people could look at them. So, and there wasn't a lot of discussion at your last meeting that I attended. There wasn't a lot of public discussion, just so you know.
Just curious, if this is at the level of other hot button issues in town, has this historically been the course that has been taken?
No. What have they proposed?
Yes.
That's, every situation's unique, okay, let's start there. And this situation, this opportunity is interesting, got different variables in it, they're all good. If you're gonna have a briefing and we've set flags, that, you know, make it for the membership of the organizations and, well, you know, let people get it out, get the questions on the table so they're better prepared when we have a public hearing to bring their comments together and put them into the pot, put them into the mix. As Adele pointed out, when a town body holds a public hearing, they're under no obligation to enter a discourse or an argument or a back and forth. I regret that, because back at the other meetings that I've conducted, sometimes the people would ask a question that's obvious and, you know, answer it. And I did, and I probably shouldn't, because you answer his question and then somebody else comes up with a lulu that you don't really are not prepared to answer, then anyway, you get the idea. But the forum that was suggested, I think is ideal because it will focus the issues, and they can be brought forward at the public hearing. That's what it's for. And then subsequent to that, the different meetings of the committees to sort things out. I think, Susan, you'll be happy with the way it works.
I mean, I'm not opposed to any suggestions, I'm just trying to get an understanding, like,
Well,
would this be the normal course, or is this above or below?
The paper bags had a huge, these guys were on the RTM, I wasn't, they had a huge campaign. They went to vendors, they talked to people in town. I mean, it was a much bigger process.
Mhm.
So that, I think, and Frank, please correct me, that was way over. I mean, they really did a huge amount of education.
and there was a strong lobbying group for it,
Right.
advocacy group. And that advocacy group did
I mean, you
more
guys,
than half of the public relations work.
yeah.
They had the articles in the newspaper, they had the act together. And it was still a certain amount, because they, anyway.
You guys can have all these meetings, that's fine. It's just, I thought if you had one big meeting, it'd be easier, but, you know, that's.
It's up to you, yeah, truthfully, that's the idea of having, we had discussed having an information session before the public hearing.
Yeah, go back to what we mentioned earlier
Well,
on.
Flip is on the line, let him.
That's what,
Yeah.
I kept hearing things, I kept looking at my phone, sorry, Flip.
Can I ask a question? I think most of the people in the room have had an opportunity to read through the draft ordinances. Is there anything that you all think is likely to capture a lot of commentary and controversy? I mean, to liken, at least in my personal mind, to liken this change to these ordinances to the paper, to the plastic bag ordinances is like apples and oranges. These are just normal good sense things that don't have a lot of controversy to them in most cases, but I'd be interested if others have a different perspective.
We really haven't, canvassed our people yet, although we talked about it a bit at our last meeting of the Park and Rec. The people held their, we said, well, we will wait with our questions. I have a couple of ideas, but I wouldn't want to speak for people truthfully.
And I can say that in my review last weekend, where I came up with the cosmetic stuff, I was very pleased to see that the substances there is good. I don't know what people would object to. It's just, but we'll find out.
I think we can all say that probably the rafting part.
I think the rafting, for sure.
Will bring a lot of discussion.
I think 4 boats is too many personally, or especially for bigger boats, so I mean, there definitely could be.
So, I mean, that's one, that's an easy one for you.
Well, yeah, I mean, keep in mind, we already have a rafting provision that is more restrictive than that.
I realize that, you asked.
Yeah.
I don't have a boat, so.
Okay, thanks.
We good?
Yes, and Susan, we've heard you. We're working on the publicity. We'll try to get out to all the boating community. We just haven't figured out how. And Lori, we just haven't figured out how yet, but we will. It's only April.
Yeah.
There's plenty of time, and we are doing it.
Yeah. It is trickier now, because even a few years ago, I have to say this, our local paper's coverage of issues that were being discussed, but frankly was much more robust.
Is there even a local paper anymore? I haven't seen it in
Ish.
years. I mean,
Varying times.
Yeah. But it's really frankly, I think they're watching the videos and summarizing them, but back even a few years ago, if we had something going on with Parks and Rec, the reporter would call me, want to get input, they might call other people, and things got in the paper, so, townspeople, certainly in the 36 years I've lived here, you had a more sense of kind of what was happening in town. That was sort of the key source, but that's not so much the case.
The great news
anymore.
too is that John has every mooring holder and waitlist holder's email, if I'm not mistaken. So that's huge, to figure out how to send 2 documents out and let them know. I mean, that's a home run. So you hit the people that are involved, and then we figure out, like, the boat club and the yacht club can maybe send out emails.
I'll have to look into the system's capability as far as attachments.
Okay.
But I would recommend it would be an email sent out with a hyperlink
Yeah.
to the
Yeah.
document.
And that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
That's a huge, that will reach,
One small thing we didn't mention is that Krista has done a very nice thing last year or so. We opened up an email account, and it's something like DarianRTM@DarianCT.com. And so what we'll do our very best to, in our publicity, to say that come to the public hearing, or send a message to DarianCT by such and such a date. After the hearing is over, we'd really like to move along and not keep the thing open for too long, but ask people to write, if they can't come to the hearing, but send us an email.
So the best you can publicize this, because people do, always zoom in at the last minute and are pretty sure that they never heard anything about this before.
Yep.
And then they always have, a point of view. So the more you let them know what it is and put it out there, and then we'll take it from there.
Thank you for your
very much.
hospitality.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Only.
Let's move on to shellfish. Marty, any update? And actually, you've got the next 2 topics.
Okay. Start with shellfish. The Board of Selectmen meeting that I attended, we put it on the table. We decided to table the co-management permit. There's 2 documents, co-management permit and the addendum. Co-management permit allows fishing in an area off of Long Neck Point to the south and west. To the best of my knowledge, that was transferred to the Freights, but it was fished a lot, and they don't fish it anymore. They don't include it on their license. So it seemed superfluous to try and renew that agreement if it's not being utilized. So we decided to table that, at least in the short term. The other document, the addendum, refers to the area up in Scotts Cove, a restricted relay area, where they're allowed to take from that area, transplant out into an approved or conditionally approved area during certain periods of time through the year, and basically harvest that after a 14-day period, after 50 degrees of water temperatures and a meat sample sent to the state. So that was the discussion item. There was a couple items that the Board of Selectmen had questions on. Basically the distinction between the boundaries of the two areas. I think there was some confusion. It's very close in acreage, but it is indeed two separate and distinct areas, so that was cleared up. Some of the language is, for the co-management permit, they must mark out the area with flags versus they shall have the option to mark out the flags in Scotts Cove. I assume, and John, you might be able to weigh on this, that it's open waters, there's a lot of boaters out there. You'd like to know if something's there, you flag it out, versus there's a lot less boating activity way up in Scotts Cove, so they have the option to mark it out if they want to, but it's not necessarily required. That's my take on it.
When you're saying marking, you mean stakes?
Yeah, with
Okay.
reasonable accuracy is how it's described, to flag it. That was a quick explanation that I plan to give to Monica, who asked the question. The approach that we had taken with Bobby Burney was to retroactively approve everything that had occurred from the expiration of the last agreement, which was in 2022, May of 2022. And rightfully so, the Board of Selectmen didn't really feel comfortable with all that. Just to, rubber stamp everything that had been done. Ideally, it was all up to snuff. And I agree with that. So we went back to the drawing board on that section of the draft. And just as of today, we have a draft that would basically just permit start on whenever this thing gets signed, which could be after the next Board of Selectmen meeting, and cease harvesting operations as it says in the old document as of May 31st of 2025, and then resume November 1st of 2025 and cease again in May 31st of 2026. So essentially it'd be a one-year approval, taking into account the windows that we put in place. And that's primarily to restrict fishing during the boating season in that area. I checked in with the state of Connecticut today about time of year restrictions on pulling from a restricted relay area, and I conferred with David on that a little bit too. There are no restrictions time of year, so it's a town decision, and that was the way it was written in prior agreements. So we're going to adopt that again. The term will line up to expire June 30th of each year. That would coincide with the state license, which renews every July 1st. So basically, harvest everything between November 1st and May 31st of each year, and it renews June 30th of each year. The question that John Zagrowski had was, does it need to be a year? Can it be 3, so we don't have to do this every year? And I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I think in talking with a couple of the commissioners, it would be good to approve it for this coming year and then evaluate. Either John has the option to evaluate after that if we want to continue doing this exact agreement or if we want to change it in the future. So we'll set up a one-year agreement expiring next June. And then Bobby Burney was going to propose some language, if it makes sense and if everybody agrees, to basically give John the ability to approve it for one more year, or the first selectman, give the first selectman to approve it one more year going forward. So it doesn't have to end up on the Board of Selectmen agenda every year and go through that process. So I wanted to pitch that to Commission, and if if everybody agrees with that, then I'll go back to Bobby and say, please turn a draft, and then we'll send that off to Linda as well. And ideally get it on the agenda for the next Board of Selectmen meeting.
Can you just come back to the marker poles? Did I understand you right that it's optional in Scotts Cove but required out at sea?
Correct.
I was just thinking about that. It sort of should be the other way around. I would think the freights would think that. I mean, in the age of GPS, I don't know if it matters that much, but they've gotten in trouble for going outside the bounds in Scotts Cove. And that would be where it's restricted outside of their, forbidden, outside of their zone
Right.
and restricted within the zone. So those zones really matter there, and they got their license yanked by the state for violating that a couple of years ago.
Got it.
Whereas out at sea, who cares if they're off some yards?
Right.
So it would seem to me sort of opposite of the way it should be.
Well, on the other hand, though, if you're off out of the co-management bed, that means you're in somebody else's
territory.
backyard where you shouldn't be,
Gotcha.
which
a good
might
point.
be particularly offensive to one of those other leaseholders. I don't know.
Well, the other thing I mentioned,
There's no other
I see your
contiguous
point there.
leaseholder that I can think of, except maybe, well, maybe that's not true. But at least in the kind of restricted area of Scotts Cove, you're not going up against somebody else's.
Gotcha, and that's a good rebuttal. The other thing I might point out, though, I really dislike those stakes out in the open water.
The bamboo things that they
Yeah,
stick
and
out.
I've almost got one in the eye, healed over in a boat late at night one time going by. Whereas in Scotts Cove, you don't have the traffic.
Yeah, I think that was kind of the idea. There's just not as much traffic. And
Yeah.
everybody loves the lobster pots off Japan, so I don't know if we need more sticks in the water than that, but unless they're lit.
Right, so that's the reason why it's optional. No, it's not optional outside, it's required outside.
Yeah, but that one we're not renewing this year.
Okay, so that's
it's
not
kinda
consequence, yeah,
off
okay.
the agenda. There is one abutter, it's the Ziegler's Cove, which is apparently owned by Cynthia. That's what I'm told by the state.
There's one,
The
what?
Ziegler grounds.
Would bump up against the Scotts Cove?
Correct.
Yeah.
And the contaminated island bed and the other side.
But it's unused.
And then below that would be Bloom, and there's a little bit of discrepancy there apparently. That I didn't quite get into as much, but I was also confirmed that the Kramer grounds were sold off to various entities of Bloom. So around the clumps is all Bloom. And
Yeah.
yeah. And
They're
then
out in Bay, they're over in there also.
the one we discussed about in Fish Island there was, oh God, I don't remember what the guy's, Felder? You know
That's
who
the
Felder
doctor.
is? I'm not sure, but
I think that's the doctor who owned the house on the land.
Yeah,
He's gone,
gone
right?
for years,
Yeah, so that's probably not updated.
that's still, that's a fresh map. It might not be, that's what the owner name is, so we can go back and double check. But
Does that transfer with the real
The house?
estate?
Yeah, and they just didn't change
Of
the
the
name
house?
of the lease, yeah.
That's a possibility. I'm not sure, but that's what the up-to-date interactive map indicates. So, long story short, it's basically the same agreement, same terms as before, November to May, harvesting, 1 year, renewing every July 1st. Still the 10% requirement to put on the beds. That's about it.
Well, this seems reasonable to me. Are you seeking a vote from us that,
No, not necessarily, I just wanted to see if anybody had any input otherwise, but that's generally it.
go forth?
We
The
shall.
comment that I made to Marty was if the co-management bed is no longer productive, either because there aren't very good natural clam sets or whatever's going, it was overfished or whatever's going on in nature. And we're going to have land-based access to at least some of our recreational town beds, the seasonal Ziegler's Cove and the Great Island bed. There may be much greater demand for clams to be put down there to have people who are doing this have access to it in a reasonable way. We may not want to once Great Island opens up, to give away the clams in Scotts Cove, and rather try to keep those for ourselves, have someone as, you know, maybe, why can't I think of his name now, Norm Bloom, you know, could harvest those for us, let them depurate somewhere, bring them back, because we're gonna have greater demand in the future. We may have greater demand, I don't know.
So maybe keeping this on a 1 year by 1 year makes
I-
sense, because you may
I
want to
think so.
recut the,
Nobody's gonna be accessing it this year unless I've misread what's going on Great Island. So probably doesn't matter, but may wanna hoard our clams for future use.
And I think that's a good plus one for allowing the first selectman to renew this annually without full-on Board of Selectmen agenda process, procedure, whatever the word is. And sorry if I sound kind of uneducated in that sense, government is, I'm just getting into it. So, learning how it all works. But, yeah, I agree with that. And the other bed off of Long Neck Point, perhaps that, if nobody is using that and there is no agreement to fish it, I don't know if there should be any kind of penalty involved for someone that is fishing it, because it is town property.
Well, no one should be able to without getting a permit from,
I agree, but to Bill's point, some.
who knows what goes on out there, right? Nobody's watching.
They're out there, yeah, right, short of going out at 4 in the morning or flying a drone, nobody knows. So,
Although they're supposed to have GPS trackers and
that's true.
the state is supposed to know what's going on,
but they don't check them proactively, they look back sometimes, do an audit, or if they hear
Yeah.
something, then they'll check.
Or they can go back and look where the vessel's been.
But that area offshore could be more of a sanctuary for the next however many years until we want to renew it. But for now, that is just the town's property and no one is utilizing it, so. It'll stay like that for now. Any other questions on Shelford? Okay. Lori, would you like to tag team dredging with me?
Sure, you can start.
John, yeah. All right.
You have much more technical expertise than I do.
Okay, I think the gist of the meeting that we had back in earlier this month was that there are two separate and distinct projects. There's the Pear Tree Point element of the dredging up and around the boat club, from the boat ramp to the Love Boat. What's the name? The Love Boat? Is that the thing?
Love
Machine.
7.
4, right?
Love
7.
4 or 5?
That's one round. Call it 80 or 90% of that is contaminated, and the rest of it is suitable for open water disposal. I think the general discussion was to just consider it all contaminated and dispose of it all the way that Weston and Sampson had suggested, which is to barge it over to New Jersey, Clean Earth, where Clean Earth generally thermal treats things. They just burn it and it comes out as dust, and it's not a very good material for anything besides being turned into some sort of cement product. So that's what'll happen with that material. That's the plan, at least. I don't know if the contractor has any say in how what actually happens, if they come up with a better idea that may be cost saving or more environmentally friendly or whatever, but that's the suggested path on how to treat those dredge spoils. The main channel is suitable for open water disposal. We have Army Corps approval on that. Coastline Consulting is going through the pre-application meetings with Connecticut DEP, and we're able to perform that dredging under a certificate of permission, which is great because it's a much easier process to get that permit. So once those pre-application meetings are complete, they will go ahead and submit a formal application, and that'll be a couple-month review by the DEP, and then a 6-month comment period with the Army Corps, basically conferring between Connecticut and New York on open water disposal. So the leader is that 6-month comment period. I think DEP is more like 90 days for that review. So it's likely we may have the COP in hand, but you won't get it without the Army Corps' approval. So those two things will work in tandem. But yes, that outer channel that's a big cost savings for the town to just dump it, presumably with the same hopper barges that could be used up and around the boat club. There's a question about combining the two projects. It would certainly make sense if you have the dredge rig mobilized to just keep it on hand and do it all. But we're going to just continue on under the pretense, since we already have the permit for the dredging for the boat club, to, I'm trying to remember what the June 30th deadline we're waiting for.
Well, we concluded that there's too much of a mismatch in the timing because of the approvals that are still needed for the main harbor.
That's right.
We expect to have the bid package ready, hopefully by the end of this month or very soon. And ideally, in a perfect world, if we got all the approvals and the money and everything worked great, to get the project going. We have a 5-year approval. This fall would be 3 years into that already. There's timing issues. We can't do the project any time of year because we have to work around, the boat club's opening days and different things. So it just really felt that with the up to a year we concluded for all the steps for the main harbor dredging,
Right.
that it just would be too risky. And also because it was concluded that the dredge material from the two projects can't be commingled anyway, that these probably can just run or should, run as two different projects, with the possibility of that when we go out to bid, you could maybe let the contractors know that there will be this add-on project maybe a year down the road, and see if they give you any kind of discount for repeat business or something like that. I'm sure there's more technical terms.
Yeah, right. We generally know the volumes to be excavated out of the main channel, so if they can include some sort of rider in their proposal that's good for a year or what have you, show them those plans as draft preliminary plans and suggest a ballpark price that is good for X amount of months.
Who would pay?
Who would pay? Not me. No, I'm just kidding. The town of Darien, I imagine. I mean, I don't know. That's a good question.
I don't have any discussion otherwise.
Martin, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Last time you had mentioned that there was a new encasement process.
I brought that up.
Yeah,
The
and so what was that
Generally,
response?
the dredge material, it's like sediment. It's
Yeah.
just not a good suitable material to build upon. So you risk sinkholes and settling in unsatisfactory ways in the parking lot. If they were to use that as a whole 1 foot of fill underneath, call it another foot of gravel and pavement on top of that, and it's just not the right kind of base material that you want to use.
Yeah, no, Weston Sampson was very clear that it's not suitable to be used on site.
Right, I don't think you were at the last meeting, but he had mentioned that there was this new process that he was working on. So that's what I was asking.
Oh, yeah, the engineered control variance.
Right.
Yeah, unfortunately, the pavement, usually you could do like a 6-inch binder, or you can consider asphalt or concrete as the cap.
Right.
But, yeah, would have been cool if it was just a wide open field, but not as a parking lot for structural reasons. So,
Thank you.
I think that's the gist of it.
Yeah, when we talked to him 2 weeks ago, he
Right.
said that just wouldn't work.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Maureen.
Yeah.
This past Saturday, we had a reduced but good shoreline pickup that basically went north from the boat ramp up to the first big curve, and including the little island right off the boat club, and then over at Weed Beach, where we picked up over at that sort of junior sailing area. but there wasn't that much stuff in the grand scheme of things. And I have a feeling that since we're mostly looking for cans and bottles and pieces of styrofoam and stuff like that, that if we schedule this again and wait for DHS graduation to take place,
Yep.
probably the week after would be a really good time. All through that water, and particularly over at Weed Beach. David went to the land trust land that's off Juniper Road, and he said there's a bunch of timber there. And I'm gonna figure out how to get rid of that, borrow a pickup truck and just get 2 or 3 volunteers to throw the stuff in the truck and take it up to the dump. I guess that was probably detritus from the winter storms busting up docks. It would be the logical way to think of where the lumber would come from.
A
So,
lot of it, Sam, a lot of that stuff, I was over there like a week ago. A lot of it is just natural wood.
oh, like logs?
Yeah, and logs and branches.
Well, whatever, it's pickup truck appropriate.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna borrow the, put a pickup truck and go, gather 2 or 3 more people and go over to low tide and just pick it up and get it out of there and take it to the dump. And then we'll do it again, I guess, David, sometime in October.
Yeah, I think we put a date on the calendar.
You did, yeah. Can't remember the date, but it's in October. And Lori, you can maybe tell us if we ought to just have a pop-up cleanup party at Weed Beach in mid-June. And if you think that the answer is yes, I'm sure we can get 5 or 6 of us to go over there and just do it.
Thank you very
Put it in
much.
garbage bags and get it out of there.
I mean, I know the staff does it, but it's a big burden on them after
And
these parties.
the stuff I found was, way back in the weeds and the phragmites, and it's just, you gotta kind of work it to get it out.
But overall, the beaches are quite clean, and I think.
Thank you.
I was surprised at how little there was, and makes you think that maybe doing it after graduation and after Halloween is a good sort of sequencing. Anyway, to be continued, and we'll pick up that stuff that's at Juniper Road, and we'll figure out a date and send it around. And then, who was going to give an update on the long-term plan of conservation development? David, was that you?
I don't know anything about it.
We've all been taking these surveys. Bill, were you going to talk about that?
I wasn't, I attended a meeting, I'm trying to think what was said at, the consultant gathered us.
Well, I guess I don't have any update for this,
I
so
don't think it really-
we'll skip
It
this.
was more procedural.
And the consultant was scheduled to come and meet with the Parks and Recreation Commission, but something happened the day of our meeting and he couldn't come, so Jeremy Ginsburg came in his place and interviewed the commission, and, we spoke for about half an hour, 45 minutes, and, really get the perspective in terms of, usage of the parks, demand on the parks, what's the same since we did our last master plan, what's changing in town, so we really talked about those sort of things, because when projects for the parks are proposed, for instance, like the Pear Tree project, in addition to getting the technical zoning approvals that you need, can you raise the parking lot, can you do this? Separately, we have to get an approval from planning and zoning that the proposed project is consistent with the POCD. So what ends up in that document can impact our ability to do future, projects. So, it's those sort of things, that we need to talk to them about in terms of sort of our vision and what we see, the needs of the residents. And we're hoping that they'll also be able to give us data, projecting on population growth and what, like, sort of, do they have metrics on, what's an ideal amount of, open space acreage per capita or per 10,000, or just, if there's different ways they can, guide us in the community on what we're needing. So, but it was very kind of open, open dialogue. They'd given us some questions in advance to sort of, think about and be ready for, and,
So we had a meeting with sustainability, beautification, Frank representing Holly Pond, and the Coastal Commission. Flip and Sam and I jumped in there also. And mainly it was the consultant answering our questions, I think mostly about what is the process and is this a big, what type of document is this? And we really gathered pretty strongly that this is a pretty wide strategic plan. It's not like line up your projects that you want to get done over the next 10 years. Yeah. So like you said, you want to make sure what might come down the pike is going to fit in that large strategic plan. So it's pretty general setting. It serves a real purpose. But I think I can speak for the commission, we jumped at the thought of, or came to the realization that make sure it's broad enough to accommodate what we might think of in the next 10 years, but don't worry about stuffing it with a laundry list of things we might want to do. So in some sense, it's a broad general exercise.
And it's a 10-year cycle. And the last one was 16, and the next one is 26, looking out. So there's actually more than 12 months of surveys, writing, and studying that are going to be, that we'll see notice of. We can participate in meetings, lob in suggestions, and I think what Bill said is right. It needs to be broad. It was within the existing long-term plan, for example, that they found an appropriate section that applied to the acquisition of Great Island, as an example. So we'll hear more about it in various discourse, I guess.
Does it take into account the demographic changes that are going on in town?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
What are the demographic changes?
A lot more kids, a lot more apartments.
It should, yeah. Chapters 4 through 7 in the 2016 version, which is online, you can find it pretty easily somewhere in the town website. It's worth taking a look at for the commissioners to see. You'll see the coastal resources section, which is mainly written by Flip, although Flip, correct me if I'm wrong, I think I jumped in on some pages. But in any event, as Flip pointed out after the meeting, we really pretty well grabbed a wide enough swath that accommodated the 10 years. And I think it was sort of our informal take that basic outline that we did might serve its same purpose with some polishing and tweaking. There's certain things we look back on we could have maybe said a little better, but I think it would help for you to look at those chapters 4 to 7, and we might just be chapter 4, but there's also a natural resources section which has comment on the water shed management, which is relevant. So that might be a source of discussion in the future commission.
Would you be good enough to
I'll send it around.
Download it and send it around? And Susan, you want to see it?
I've seen it, I know where it is, but thank you. Thank you for including me, that's okay. Thank you.
Yeah, let's circulate it around, focus on chapters 4 through 7, and see if we can come up to speed on what you and Flip contributed a decade ago, because it is going to be the template for the next one. But that's a year down the road. The only thing I want to mention is that, before we adjourn, is that the next meeting is not next month. It's June 18th. Okay? You should know it. I'll be sending around emails to people, but the next meeting is in this room on June 18th. Which, interestingly, looks like it'll be after one of the first hearings on the ordinances. So we'll be able to report back.
It's the same night as Parks and Rec, so I won't be here.
18th?
It's on a Wednesday instead of a Thursday. thought you did.
Why did that happen? There was some reason why I have it on the 18th, but would you appreciate me looking at it, where's the 19th? There was some problem with the
Yeah,
19th.
no, it's fine, it's fine. I watched the movies back, and I'm not a voting member, so.
Wasn't there a holiday on the 19th?
It's Juneteenth. There's no town meetings are to be scheduled on.
Good call, Flip. Okay, well, I guess that explains it. I move we adjourn. All in favor? Nods all around the table. We're done. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Ethan.
All right, good.